All right. I want to thank everybody for tuning in and listening and supporting this podcast. And if you do dig what we're doing here, please subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts and spread the word and leave reviews. And all of that really helps gain visibility and get this out there to more people. Also, if you really like the podcast and you really want to support, go check out Patreon. I set up a Patreon just last week. Where you can go and financially support the podcast. And when you do that, you will get, there's 4 different tiers of support you can do, from $5 to $50. And those all come with added benefits, like we're going to do exclusive podcast, exclusive content that will only go out to Patreon subscribers. You get a discount at my motorcycle shop, chopahead.com. You will get advanced news of things coming up. You will get producer status on some of these. You'll get discounts on merchandise. You'll get added into drawings, monthly drawings for giveaways from our generous sponsors and friends that have donated products to give away for the podcast. All kinds of added benefits, and there'll be even more as I think of more, or as I hear from you guys and tell me what kind of stuff you want to see on there. Simply go to patreon.com/bigtruth, and that's Patreon. So patreon.com/bigtruth. And now, this is a question to the gentleman out there. Your nether regions, does it look like someone poking a finger outside of a wool sweater? Or poking a finger through a wool sweater? If it does, don't got time for that. I know winter's coming and everyone wants to get a little sloppy or try and stay a little warmer, but just do yourself and whoever your partner is a favor and clean it up down there. And I got just the thing for you. Go to manscaped.com and check out their razor. It's called the Lawnmower 3.0, and it's a razor that's been scientifically developed and research backed just for those sensitive nether regions. So basically, you can go to town down there, clean everything up. You don't got to worry about nicks, cuts, scratches, or blood on the fingers, anything like that. The blade is a ceramic compound, which is gentler for the more sensitive spaces. And they also have a thing called the Perfect Package 3.0, which is their Lawnmower 3.0 razor, plus a whole other list of products. So it's a very discounted package, and you should really check them out. They got all kinds of products that you'd be interested in, and they make good gifts too. So check them out, manscaped.com, and use the promo code BIGTRUTH at checkout, and you'll get 20% off your entire order, plus free shipping. So manscaped.com. Whether it's something you're picking up for yourself or picking up as a gift, use the promo code BIGTRUTH at checkout. You'll get 20% off your entire order and free shipping. Also, if you are in the unfortunate situation where you get into a motorcycle accident, and I hope you never are, and I hope you never have to use this next sponsor, but you definitely want to check out Law Tigers, and you can find them at lawtigers.com or give them a call at 1-888-868-0208. Now, they are a law firm that specializes in motorcycle accidents, and it's a law firm that's founded by motorcycle riders, and it's made to service motorcycle riders. Free case evaluation, so, just give them a call first. It can't hurt. It's not going to cost you anything. And also, you can find them on Instagram at Law Tigers, and you can find them on Facebook simply at Law Tigers. But if you put the name of your state after Law Tigers, you'll get connected to your more local offices of the Law Tigers. So, for example, here in Massachusetts, go to Facebook and type in Law Tigers Massachusetts, and you'll get that page. That way you get more local service. Omerta is a clothing brand out of Los Angeles that 2 of my friends run, and you should check them out. They got all kinds of good gear, whether you're looking for some hoodies or shirts or socks, scarves, jackets, whatever, man. They do everything. Most of it's done in-house, and they use all American apparel as much as possible. It's not easy to source everything American made, but as much as they can, they do. So check them out, omertamia.com, omertamia.com. Again, omertamia.com. Also, if you use the promo code Big Truth there at checkout, you will get 20% off your order there as well. We're just saving you money everywhere. That's the goal, right? More Christmas gifts or more holiday gifts or more stuff for yourself. You know, they're well known for their Stop Glorifying Rat shirt, but there's all kinds of other things there. So, again, check them out, amertamia.com, and also on Instagram, Facebook, and stuff, simply at amertamia. Chop Cult is the largest online. Sorry, my other cell phone's so unprofessional. I usually shut it off, and someone's and it actually says spammers. That's awesome. We can thank the spammers for interrupt the show, and my stupid self for not putting it on silent beforehand. But so yeah, we were talking about Chop Cult. They are the biggest online resource for motorcycle riders and chopper builders and the custom motorcycle scene. They got a full bore active with many member message boards broken up by topics. So whatever you're looking for, you can go to that topic, and there will be a plethora of information and fun stuff there. They also have an online swap meet where you can buy, sell, trade parts like that. I've always seen a bunch of cool, rare stuff on there. They have an online events page, so you can find out about motorcycle events all across the world. And, they got a mailing list where they'll send you some news. You know, they're just trying to get information out there for you guys. So check them out, chopcult.com. Membership is absolutely free. They don't ask you for no credit cards or nothing sketchy. And on all the social media, simply at ChopCult. Pitchfork is a clothing company and record label run by Warren and some other friends. And you can check them out at pitchforkny.com. Again, pitchforkny.com. They're a heavy-duty, hard-hitting clothing company who are very prevalent in the heavy metal, punk rock, and hardcore music scenes. And you see them just all over the place. Chances are your favorite band is rocking one of their shirts. They also have a record label where they do this back to school series, limited run of 7-inch records, where they have a East Coast band on one side and a West Coast band on the other. Past acts include Rancid, Murphy's Law, Sick of It All, The Eulogy, Thug Riot, Count Time, all kinds of stuff you want to check out. So check them out, pitchforkny.com, and on social media at pitchforkny. Chop Ahead Custom Cycles is my motorcycle shop. If you are in the New England area, come on by. We're a brick and mortar shop with a showroom, parts counter, and a full-service Harley-Davidson motorcycle shop. Whether you got a vintage Harley or a modern Harley, whether you need an oil change or a full custom chopper built, custom audio, you need some speed enhancements done to that motor, bigger displacement, cams, whatever you got to do, whatever you want to do, we can take care of you. www.chopahead.com. If you're not local and you want to go on and buy some swag, we got all kinds of shirts and hoodies and beanies are back in stock. I said hoodies, whatever. I'm not reading this stuff. I'm just going off the fly. So forgive me if I stutter through some of it, but yeah. And whatever part you need, whether we have it online on the website or not, we can probably get it for you. So give us a call, or shoot us an email. Just shoot an email over to truth@chopahead.com, and we'll get you all hooked up. Again, and for more information on the podcast, just check out bigtruthpodcast.com. All the episodes are up there, and there's more information and everything. So again, thank you for listening today. I'm super psyched to get into today's episode, so why don't we just start it right now?
Sequence start. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. We have a liftoff.
Yes, once again, we have liftoff. I want to thank you all for listening to the Big Truth Podcast. I got a special guest today that I'm really stoked to talk to. His name is Manesh Girn, and you might have seen him online as the Psychedelic Scientist. He's got a really interesting Instagram. He's a neuroscience and PhD student at McGill University and our neighbors to the north, and is a neuroscientist that is actively studying psychedelics. And I want to welcome you to the podcast. How you doing, Manesh?
I'm doing well. Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, and it'd be nice to do this stuff in person, but we got, I don't think we can travel back and forth, and we got a little bit of a situation happening, but I'm glad you took the time to talk to us today over the phone at least, and I'm looking forward to it. Right now there seems to be like a renewed or sparked interest both in popular culture and in the medical world, in some facets of the medical world, in psychedelics, and especially in I'm particularly interested in their therapeutic uses, more than recreational. So that's kind of what we'd like to talk to you a little bit about today. But before we get into it, why don't you give our listeners just a little bit of background about you and your studies and kind of what got you into the study of psychedelics in the first place?
Yeah, for sure. For me, it's been a long time coming. I think even when I was around 17, I somehow, found my way into reading books on meditation just on the recommendation of some people. And kind of like, from that age, I was kind of more philosophically thinking about different ways to change how we see the world and ourselves, and really fascinated with spirituality, like Buddhism and all this. And, reading about this concept of kind of, becoming more aware of our tendencies and growing in our awareness of things, and just working through issues that we have in our minds. Eventually my reading brought me to psychedelics. And at the time, I started reading stuff talking about how they can catalyze these kind of experiences, transformative experiences, which allow people to have insight into their patterns and create lasting change in just their well-being and their outlook on life, and when done responsibly, of course, and we can go into that. But at the time I was like, most people, when you talk about LSD or magic mushrooms, they think like, oh, that's a hard drug. You're going to go crazy if you take that. And, but the thing is, in the 50s and 60s, there was a huge scientific literature showing their potential for various things. Many well-educated, scientists, psychiatrists, really seeing them as being the next big thing in psychiatry. And then they were shut down for largely socio-cultural reasons by the Nixon administration in the late 60s. But anyway, I came across this stuff as a late teen. I was like, nobody's talking about this. This is important. And then time to go to university came around, graduated from high school, and I was like, I want to somehow study this stuff. And then eventually I was really into psychology and philosophy. And then I happened to join a research lab at the University of British Columbia over in Vancouver, where I'm from. And they were doing stuff on meditation and daydreaming and all these kind of also, airy, abstract things, but they're from a scientifically rigorous way. And then, so then from that, I got into neuroscience, and I was like, yeah, neuroscience is more objective. It's actually the brain. You're not talking about just these really subjective things, and people are going to take it more seriously. And then, through that, I got into wanting to understand psychedelic drugs. And basically, my particular window into this whole research area is, it's like, what are the mechanisms? So what's basically happening in the brain to allow these really radical and profound experiences to happen? And, and by understanding that, how can we understand the ability to transform ourselves more generally? And how can we better understand how, for example, our sense of self, our sense of being a distinct person with these beliefs and patterns, how is that encoded by our brain, and how can it be disrupted? And, and so all these things were just so fascinating. They're still fascinating to me. And I want to dedicate essentially my career, my life to studying this stuff and contributing to the world's knowledge.
Nice. Yeah. And that's, something that you brought up, was, looking into meditation and things like that early on. I have friends from all different walks of life and facets, and I I have one particular friend who studied martial arts for a long time, and even to the point where like they spend retreats on mountains where some people are there for 10 years and really heavy into it. Not just not a lay person, not at a strip mall karate dojo, like really getting into the full kind of world of that and the immersion of that. And a lot of like the people he studied under said that that one of the goals through meditation and or not even one of the goals, but like when they've just reported that there's similar kind of, for lack of a better term, I don't know what the real term would be, but like psychedelic experiences or psychedelic like states through intense meditation. Is that something you see any connection with, like meditation and psychedelic experiences, like whether it's through psilocybin or other kind of psychedelics? Is that something that's being looked at anywhere?
Totally, yeah. So there is some research. There's a couple notable studies in the last couple of years. One at Johns Hopkins University over in Baltimore, a very good, well-known institution. And then another study done, I believe, either in Switzerland. It was in Switzerland. And the gist from these studies is kind of what you're saying. It's that, for example, I'll talk about one of them. They had these meditators on a mindfulness retreat. So it's like a 7-day, Vipassana meditation, if you're familiar, just like being aware of your body and your thoughts and focusing on your breath and etc. And basically, they gave half of them a dose of psilocybin, so a dose of magic mushrooms during this retreat, and half of them didn't get that. And then basically, they found that for the people who got the mushrooms, they reported having greater changes to their sense of self. And basically, I think that's one of the major unifying themes here is that through meditating and through psychedelics, it alters the relationship we have to our thoughts and our emotions. And often it creates this distance between us and them where we're no longer, automatically absorbed in our thoughts and, so caught up in our own stories and beliefs. But rather you're able to see it from a broader perspective and kind of have more equanimity. And so basically they found more or less that this happened to these meditators on this retreat, and they kind of, investigated it with psychological measures and very scientifically. And they found that there are also brain changes related to this. And also, moreover, that people who took the psilocybin and had these additional changes reported greater increases in their well-being when rated after the retreat was over. So not only did it help them have these deeper meditative experiences, it had a lasting positive impact on them. So, yeah. And so there is definitely a lot of, scientific work now supporting this as well.
Sure. And I know, through the years, things like, marijuana, which would, some people consider in that realm, some people don't, with a lot of the kind of, there's been so much misinformation about a lot of these plant-based medicines or a lot of industrial kind of, for lack of a better word, espionage behind them to kind of demonize them or to sway public opinion against them or to get them put into like as a Schedule I substance. And so I know it's been hard for researchers, especially with psychedelics, to kind of continue that. But Johns Hopkins, like you mentioned, and I know Harvard and some other institutions have been still active in getting waivers to be able to do that type of research. Is the same type of are there the same similar regulations up in Canada, or is it a little more easy to do research up there?
No, it's more or less the same. Actually, there's a lot more psychedelic research going on in the States than in Canada. That's for sure. And I think some of the hubs are the States, the UK, and Switzerland. Those three countries are probably doing the bulk of the research on psychedelics these days. And it's still relatively difficult to get these studies off the ground, especially when it comes to funding, because these studies are expensive because often, to administer a drug that's, classified as Schedule I kind of substance, you need a psychiatrist on board, you need a medical team, you need all the rest, and that costs money.
Sure.
And the thing is, a lot of government agencies are reluctant to give money, and so it puts a lot of research in a bind where it's like, you need more research to show that they're effective and safe, but you need more money to do that, right? And then you need the money to do the research, but you need the research to get the money, you know? And so it's like a difficult position. Yeah.
Yeah, it's the research conundrum there, and until you get somebody at some of these funding agencies, whether it's it's hard to until it's on their radar. It's hard to get like NIH grants or anything. You got to have someone really champion it within those institutions to get the funding. You had mentioned that there was some research going on, and then pre-Nixon, and there's still stuff going on now. As someone who's kind of familiar with the literature and involved, what are some of the more and I've read about stuff where I know that some of the interesting things I've heard about were using psychedelics to help PTSD with veterans. I know they've used a couple of different psychedelics for that, and just mental health and depression and whatnot. But what's some of the more promising research out there? What's some of the more interesting or hopeful things that you've seen from the limited research that there is right now?
Mm-hmm, yeah. So if we look at pre-Nixon 50s and 60s, the two main things, the main applications were depression and alcoholism. So those were the two main ones, and they've been picked up now, in the last decade. And so I would say the most promising and the most, perhaps, the one getting the most money these days and focused on, at least in academic institutions, is depression. And so I know there's been a couple of studies using magic mushrooms or psilocybin, which is the compound in the mushrooms, for treating depression in patients who had so-called treatment-resistant depression. So these are people who have depression and were given stuff like a standard antidepressant and therapy, but that stuff wasn't working for them. And so there's research done at Imperial College London in the UK, and then also just this past week, Johns Hopkins released a study, had a paper come out also showing the effectiveness for mushroom therapy for depression. And so I feel like that's, in terms of, a psychedelic drug emerging into the psychiatric world and available, I think it's going to be mushrooms available for depression. And actually the FDA actually designated psilocybin therapy as a breakthrough therapy, which is essentially them acknowledging that it has strong potential and kind of expediting the process that makes it available. So the FDA itself is doing that, which is a huge step.
Sure.
So yeah.
When did that start with the FDA?
I think it was last year or even a couple of years ago. The FDA announced that. And now, there were a number of trials ongoing. The Johns Hopkins one just came out, and I know there's a big one in London that was supposed to come out in the spring. So it's very hopeful for depression. And there is, other studies, preliminary, as you mentioned, a lot of stuff is in its early stages, but studies for alcoholism, tobacco addiction, OCD. There's also some trials going on for anorexia.
Wow.
And, tobacco addiction, if I didn't already say that. Yeah. And so, it seems that somehow these drugs and the therapy using them taps into something that's fundamental to a broad variety of disorders. Although it's still, if we're going to be sticking to the science directly, it's still very early, and we'll see how, in the end, how much better it really is compared to standard treatments.
Sure.
But we know it works, but then it's a question of, does it work more than other treatments that are available? And if so, how, and et cetera. So that's kind of what the research needs to figure out.
Yeah. Now with the psilocybin studies with depression, I didn't really read those. Was that kind of like a microdose type situation, or were they giving people full doses?
Yeah. So these studies are interesting. So first I should say it's a full dose. Well, I'll talk about the one done in London because I'm more familiar, and there's that new one that just came out. I still have to read that paper in depth.
Yeah,
but
sure.
Basically, they screen you, so you can't have a history of schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, because it's unclear the risks associated with that. And there are more risks if you have those kind of preconditions in your family. And they basically do an extensive, preparation of the person, building a strong relationship with the psychiatrist or the therapist that will be with them for this session, going into their life history, going into their problem, etc. And then they gave them one low dose experience with psilocybin. I believe it was, basically a microdose, so very minimal, subjective effects. And then I think a few weeks later they gave him a full dose, which is a high dose of, like, it's, I believe it average, they do it by weight, but like it averages out to around 30 milligrams of psilocybin, I believe, which is around 5 to 6 dried grams. So it's a mega dose, it's a hardcore dose, but again, done in a very, very structured way with lots of preparation. And basically the idea is they're trying to induce these kind of transformative mystical experiences where they have radical shifts in their outlook on themselves and their life. And indeed, they found that the extent to which they had these mystical experiences actually correlated with how much of a therapeutic benefit they got. So it seems like these kind of experiences seem to be what are leading to the lasting, changes you're seeing with these drugs from only one experience, essentially.
Wow. Now, has there been any, because you hear about like if you hear about like a compound like DMT, where there's a lot of people kind of, and I know this is all anecdotal and not scientific, but the anecdotal data are out there is that there's people seeing kind of like, a lot of people are seeing the same type of things or having the same type of experience under a DMT type of situation. Is that going on in these therapeutic studies with the psilocybin, or is that not really touched upon too much what the actual kind of experiences were like?
No, there is work on that for sure. Like there's what's good about a lot of these studies is they, usually what they'll publish first in the main kind of study is this, there's statistical analyses, these questionnaires, your depression symptoms, very, quantitative.
Yeah.
But they're often like secondary. They also do interview the patients who go through these studies and collect a lot of, what we'd call qualitative data of, their responses and analyze that. And so they do get a solid window into the subjective experiences. And, it's interesting. DMT is this bizarre thing, right? Where you go and people say they see entities and visit these landscapes and so on. The thing with DMT often, it's like the experiences seem very unrelated to one's personal life and, and everyday reality. There's something bizarre going on there, right? But with psilocybin and also with LSD, what comes up during your session is extremely personal. Like people will often have memories come up from their childhood of when they, they were abused perhaps or went through a rough experience, and they'll remember that all of a sudden after years and have an opportunity to kind of integrate it from their adult perspective. Huh. And so like what it seems to be like psilocybin, like how it helps people with depression, for example, is because it allows them to go deep into their minds or their psyches and retrieve memories and have insights into past experiences and really make some solid kind of progress in integrating their wounds, essentially. And that's going to be very different for everybody, although like the overall structure is similar, but the exact content can be extremely different.
Sure. And I know there's kind of like, we just talked about DMT and then psilocybin or LSD. Like there's a multitude of different psychedelic kind of drugs or compounds or plants or however you kind of want to refer to them or elements. But are they finding that there's certain kind of psychedelics that are more suited to specific clinical applications, like you said, like with like depression and psilocybin? Are they finding that LSD is working better, or psilocybin, or one of the other compounds, or have there been kind of research? Has there been like research on that type of stuff, or?
Yeah, I mean, not yet. We're still too in the early stages. Like I know that, for example, psilocybin, LSD, and DMT all work on a similar kind of receptor system in the brain, so they're broadly similar. But there definitely are, distinctions between them and important differences between them. But it's far too early to really know whether, LSD is uniquely suited for alcoholism while psilocybin is for depression, etc.
Sure.
Like it's just too early to know.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So what's your specific area of interest and kind of expertise in this? Like what are you interested in? And what's your research?
Totally. So right now, my ongoing work, let's say, is aimed at just trying to kind of look at the brain changes elicited by psilocybin, magic mushrooms, LSD, and DMT. And basically, what I'm trying to do right now is look at how they're similar and how they're different, and how that might relate to their subjective effects. Like basically what we were just discussing.
Okay,
But
perfect.
yeah. So that's something I'm looking into. But again, like the data that we have is relatively scarce, right? So we can't make really, really strong claims at this point. But I'm essentially trying to provide the first pass of these things to provide a foundation for future research. And I have brain data that was collected in London at the Imperial College London Center for Psychedelic Research. People like Rob and Carhart-Harris, who are leaders in the field, and I have like collaborations with them and chat with them often. Basically, yeah, so I'm interested in seeing the similarities and differences there. And something I'm also interested in moving forward is like, how can we get a better window into the subjective experiences of these drugs in a rigorous way? You know, because as you said, a lot of science kind of, you know, we want to look at objective phenomena and not this airy subjective stuff that we can't really quantify, right?
Sure. Yeah.
And so I think, but for psychedelics, it is extremely, you know, the experiences are extremely complex and multifaceted and vary so widely that we can't just say like, oh, this is your brain under psychedelics. It's like, no, it's like extremely, you know, there's so many different states that you can enter into, and each one has its own brain kind of correlates. And so what I'm interested in is trying to find more rigorous ways to link our subjective experiences to the brain in a way that allows us to really get a better sense of what's going on. And in this context, you know, there's a recent model of how psychedelics might work, which I'm also interested in testing in some of my research. And I can briefly describe that. Basically, this model is saying that what psychedelics do through the receptor system they activate is that they kind of make our fundamental beliefs about ourselves and reality less rigid. And so they're more open to being changed. And essentially, they make everything in our mind a bit more flexible and a bit less structured and stable, so that we can make lasting changes in just like our core beliefs. And there's some hypotheses and stuff around how that might happen in the brain. And this is also something I'm really interested in looking at.
Sure. I know one thing that is kind of put out there, and I don't know how much data is to back this, but I know there's a belief that psilocybin and other psychedelics can kind of repair or create new neural pathways. And is that something that's been backed up by research, or is that kind of just someone's kind of some people's kind of thought?
Yeah. Well, there is a good amount of research, like a few like very well done studies showing that psychedelics can increase neuroplasticity. So that is true. And what that means exactly is that, you know, when you think of the brain, it's like 100 billion brain cells connected to each other in very complex ways. And basically, you know, what we know from neuroscience in the last couple of decades is that the brain's connections change over time. You know, they change when you learn a new skill. They change when you learn a new language. They change, etc. Very often in like minor ways, let's say. And in order to change, the brain kind of needs resources to build new connections between brain cells. And so what psychedelics seem to do is they kind of initiate changes in our brain cells that help them form new connections or actually alter or reorganize old ones. But the thing is, psychedelics don't like change your brain for you necessarily, but they give you a window of opportunity to kind of have these insights and realize certain things, and then also encode them in a lasting way in your brain.
Okay.
So yeah.
Wow. Yeah, it's heavy stuff. One thing, you know, I wanted to talk to you a little bit about, we'll get more into the science of it later, but it seems like, I don't know, for lack of a better word, there seems to be a little bit of an industry kind of popping up around psychedelics preemptively before it's even, fully legal or like a full thing. The same way that there's like a kind of a whole marijuana industry. And it seems like people are already kind of getting ready for that with psychedelics and getting into that space. What's some things that people should be looking out for to avoid with that? Because, or what's just your thoughts on that? Because it seems like there's there's obviously some people that are coming from, a genuine place, but then there's some people coming from like a more opportunistic place. I don't, that's just the general sense I'm getting as like a casual observer. I don't know if that's something that's really going on in the industry and if that's something that can, my concern with something like that would be that if, you got some people out there just trying to take advantage of a situation, it can really kind of put a halt, on psychedelic research if they do something, a little too wacky. I don't know if that makes sense, but I would I feel like this is an important area that's emerging. And I wouldn't want some kind of like quote unquote opportunistic person kind of doing something that kind of throws a wrench in the works and puts a halt on it because it freaks out the scientific community if you know what I mean.
Yeah, totally. I think the distinction you're making between genuine versus opportunistic is a really good way to put it. And definitely, I mean, if you look, I know I agree. It's like, the whole industry is emerging very rapidly, even though we're years away from it becoming available in a widespread way.
Yeah.
And a lot of these companies, are backed by these investment bankers and people who are in totally unrelated industries from psychedelics, right? They're basically successful business people who have a lot of money. And now a lot of them are just like, creating a story around themselves that, I want to help mental health. I'm this, person who wants to help humanity. And really, they're only saying it now that this opportunity has arisen and they smell the money there, right?
Yeah, well, I think what happened was they saw the business model with marijuana and the legalization of that or the decriminalization of that, and they saw how much money was generated right away, and I think they're just trying to jump on like, hey, this is the next big thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, totally. And there's already a number of companies, selling their shares. I think the biggest one is Compass Pathways. I think they're already valued at like $2 billion. I think I saw like something crazy. And
wow.
And they have like a really great team of researchers, etc. But there's also a lot of uncertainties around some of their higher up staff or like their founders. And there's a lot of the psychedelic community. Very skeptical and suspicious, let's say, of these companies. Some of it, I think, is just like, a kind of negative feeling around any kind of psychedelic capitalism, quote unquote.
Yeah.
And some of it maybe is justified by some shady actions, perhaps. But I think at the end of the day, though, I feel like clinics who do things, who have some kind of malpractice in the way they run their clinics, will be identified, and if they don't follow the protocols that are shown by science to be effective, they're probably going to have less good outcomes.
Sure.
If they're just trying to mass produce psychedelic therapy and just get everyone in and out, that's not the model used by these studies showing these significant changes, right?
Yeah.
And so sooner or later, they're going to be seen like, oh, you're not really supporting them as much as you should be, like, or you have this wrong. And so I feel like that would be counterbalanced. But I think one issue is a lot of these for-profit companies, jacking up the prices and competing and making it inaccessible for, lower middle-class people, perhaps. And it's unclear how much insurance is going to be covering these things, at least in the beginning.
Sure.
So there might be some, it might be exclusive for people of a certain socioeconomic status, which is created by people not really offering these services at like how much they truly cost to provide it, but rather, at the amount that compares to standard antidepressants, which is pretty high, right?
Yeah.
So that's definitely a concern.
Has there been any, one of the things with antidepressants, pharmaceutical antidepressants, is you hear about, a whole array of scary or potentially dangerous side effects from their use. out of these studies where they've been using psilocybin or any other psychedelic compound, have there been, what have been some of like kind of the, you know, what or if has there been any of the has there been any kind of negative side effects, and what have those been? And especially like in comparison to a more pharmaceutical grade compound.
Totally. I mean, very little, right? So if you take a standard antidepressant like an SSRI, like something like let's say Prozac or something like that, you get this kind of blunting of emotion, reduced sex drive, nausea, insomnia, the whole list. And I think an important thing to know at the beginning is that, for one, standard antidepressants, you take these things every day and you essentially become dependent on them. Whereas this psychedelic treatment model is like you have an experience. These studies have shown that you have an experience maybe 1 to 3 times, and even 6 months later, you're still showing improvements in your symptoms. Like you're not taking these things every day. It's like they're actually creating genuine change that lasts. And so when you talk about side effects for psychedelics, on one side, there's plenty of research showing that they're not neurotoxic. They don't harm your brain in any way, in any physical way. But the worst side effects you can have is having a challenging experience. You might have some anxiety and fear come up. But again, we're doing it in the context of these studies where there's so much preparation and support and everything is, controlled. There's very, very minimal anxiety that these subjects feel. And everyone, more or less has a very positive experience with it. So yeah, I would say, on the physical side, there's no negative side effects essentially. And then on the psychological side, when done again in this controlled way with the preparation and in this context, there's very minimal psychological negative effects. They do occur. There is anxiety that comes up, and some people do feel very uncomfortable, or perhaps, have some urge to get out of the brain scanner while they're scanning them or something. But that's like that's like 1 out of 20 people or something like that. Sure. So it's like not a lot of people. So yeah.
And I know that in the they've said that psychedelics should be avoided by people with like disorders like schizophrenia and stuff. And I know you touched on this a little bit earlier, but has there been research showing that there could be some negative effects there, or is it just because it's such an unknown what might happen if someone has like a multi-personality or a schizophrenia or something? Is it just not known yet, or is it
Yeah, totally. I think. Yeah, it's not fully known, but it is risky territory because there are cases that have been reported in the past where, let's say a person has schizophrenia runs in their family, maybe their dad had it, and they're probably at some point in their life can experience some kind of symptoms. And then, they took a really high dose of LSD in an uncontrolled way, and it sped up how fast they went into that psychosis. And it kind of sped up the onset of the schizophrenia. And there are some cases, like, from the 50s, 60s, et cetera, where that happens. It won't necessarily happen to every person. And, there's a lot of ifs there. Sure. But it's definitely very dangerous territory for somebody to try this by themselves, if they have that kind of a history in their family. But I do believe, in the research in the future, and there's already papers kind of suggesting that this might be a useful thing, is using psychedelics in these populations, bipolar disorder, schizophrenia, to help them. And it's going to be, I think we got to set the standard for like it being safe and normal and healthy people and with less severe disorders first. But I do believe in the future they're going to open it up to those, but it's still too early right now.
Sure. So it's crazy the array of kind of problems like mental health disorders or issues that these things can help with. And I've even read something, and I didn't read too deep, but it was just something that I kind of skimmed by. That I can't remember where this was, but there was some research done with people in hospice care, and they were finding that with kind of psilocybin, it was helping people be able to kind of lose kind of, I guess, any anxiety or fear around death. Are you familiar with any of that? And do you know more about that study?
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I actually forgot to mention that. That's also a big one. They've, I think UCLA did a study, and also Johns Hopkins again, giving psilocybin. And also I think there was a study with LSD as well, Given these drugs, these are terminal cancer patients. They're cancer patients told, you maybe have a few months to live, and they're experiencing a lot of, depression, anxiety. They're not ready to go. They're not, et cetera. And they're finding that when they give them the psychedelics in the supportive setting, they're able to have experiences where they kind of come to terms with their life, and they're able to, forgive people who had wronged them in the past, have more gratitude for the life they've lived, feel a connection to their loved ones, maybe even feel a connection to like a greater power. There's been some people, have gone through this and had a stronger belief that there's something else, when their body dies, and it gives them a lot of comfort and allows them to come to terms with their impending death. And so there seems to be a lot of potential there. And actually recently a company was allowed, I think it was in Canada, I think it's here in Canada, they were legally allowed to administer it to some patients to help them come to terms with their death. And that was like legally sanctioned research. I would say not even research, it's legally sanctioned use of mushrooms in a hospice setting.
Sure.
So there's a lot of potential there because, at the end of the day, these are cancer patients who are dying soon, but, we're all going to have to die someday. And having something that helps you ease that process is something relevant to every human being, right? So there's a lot of potential there to change our relationship to dying, I think.
Sure. So with a lot of this research that's going on, and I don't know if this is something that's easy to parse out or not, or if it's something that's been studied, but a lot of, in a lot of these research studies, it seems like there's the one component is someone is administering a psychedelic, but it sounds like they're also receiving mental health counseling or there's people there for that. How much, is it, I don't know if you see where I'm going with this, but can you parse out like how much of like the benefit is from, maybe just talking to someone or having someone there versus, or counseling versus, the psychedelic, or is it the psychedelic actually enhancing the counseling, or do you know what I'm saying? Is it there's got to be some kind of like interplay there? Is that something that's been looked at or thought about?
Yeah. No, this is a really good point. And definitely it's, the way we can know for sure against that is having a study where, one group gets the psychedelic therapy and the other group gets, an antidepressant with therapy.
Yeah.
And they get the same therapy. Both groups get the same therapy. Just the difference is psychedelic versus an antidepressant drug.
Sure.
And a study of that kind at a large scale level hasn't been conducted yet. Well, actually, it has, but it hasn't been published yet.
Okay.
So I know the guys over at London, the research team over there, have ran the study, and I can't say anything about the results, but they're looking to publish it in March. But so the existing studies have basically been preliminary in that, they're just looking at how psychedelics can improve depression or whatever, but they're not necessarily. Not all of them are actively comparing it to a control group where, they receive just the therapy.
Yeah.
But at the same time, the magnitude of changes in the symptoms that they're seeing with these psychedelic studies are often much, much higher than they're seeing with other existing treatments.
Sure. Or just standard, like counseling alone.
No, exactly. Yeah. Okay. So like there is like evidence showing that they're more effective, but like, there's not that many studies directly doing that in the same study. Yeah.
Just because we're still in the early stages. I only ask because, there's a lot of people in the world and I just because, just as with the caveat, someone listens to this and decides to start taking stuff to kind of treat themselves like, hey, you might want to think about things and not just jump full bore and do 6 grams of mushrooms without having any prior experiences. Because
100%.
And there's a reason that's called the hero's journey in some circles, and you want to watch out with that. So
totally.
Anything else that's going on that is, that's kind of cutting edge or interesting or that we haven't talked about?
Yeah, there were a couple of things. First, actually, I want to comment on something you mentioned last time. Just now about how the therapy process interacts with psychedelics. And I think an important thing to know is that psychedelics don't kind of do the work for you. They don't just, it's not like you just take them one day and now you're a new person.
Yeah.
What they do is they kind of give you this window of opportunity to take a cold hard look at yourself, and they help you access parts of yourself that you usually can't access, and then give you kind of the opportunity to then integrate this in your life on a day-to-day basis after. But it takes conscious, deliberate work after the experience is over to really change this kind of state into something that's lasting. And so, I mean, people thinking like, I'm going to go, as you said, do a bunch of mushrooms and then I'm going to be changed. Like, so no, you got to do a lot of introspection before and after, and a lot of conscious integration. And again, you got to be really careful about the context that you're doing them in, like who are you with, and etc.
Sure.
So there's so many things to take into account there.
Yeah. You want to be in a very relaxed environment, at least, So what's kind of like the thoughts on, because I know a lot of people who've been kind of experimenting with microdosing and are reporting, very big and very good results, anecdotally, obviously, with microdosing, where they're not going on that big trip and then having to integrate these experiences because they're barely even feeling any psychedelic effects at all. Or psychotropic events or whatever, but what's kind of the thought out there in the research community on, benefits or utility of microdosing versus, like the experiment you've been talking about with like that we've talked about earlier, like mentioned, where someone gets a little bit and then like a big kind of dose and then works around that.
Yeah, totally. It is very different. And again, this is like the research is in very early stages as well, but
Sure.
There is some work out there, and it's been a mixed bag, to be honest. Like some work, research showing that, it increases their ability on certain aspects of thinking and changes their emotions in certain ways. But what's interesting is in some of these studies, they'll ask the subjects, after they've done this microdosing, like, how do you think it affected you? And they'll give them a questionnaire.
Yeah.
And then they'll give them some tasks, like some cognitive puzzles or problems that they have to solve. And then so they have like an objective measurement, like how much better are you actually?
Sure.
And the thing is, like, what they think they were better in and what they were actually better in, didn't really line up, right?
Huh.
So it's like microdosing may be doing something, but a lot of the time it's not what people think it's doing for them.
Yeah.
Which is interesting. And that said, again, I want to emphasize research is in its early stages, and I personally think that we still have yet to really find the right tasks or things that to get them to do to really tap into what these microdoses might really be doing.
Yeah.
And so I think, because like right now we're just applying these other puzzles, problems, tasks from other aspects of psychology and seeing how they apply here. But it's like maybe we need things that are more nuanced and that tap into something specific to what seems to be going on.
Sure, yeah, because a lot of the people I've talked to that have microdosed, they just more of like feel like a general sense of well-being. It wasn't like anything like, oh, I think I could do math better or something. It was just more like general sense of like well-being or like relief or things along those lines.
Yeah.
But it's interesting that, so like what people thought they could do better and what was different than what they were actually doing better in those studies.
Yeah, at least a couple of them, yeah.
Yeah. Huh.
So it's pretty funny.
Yeah, check that out. If someone was interested in getting more information about all this, what are some of the main resources or like journal articles or things that people could access, or if there's like some kind of information clearinghouse with all this stuff, like what are some of the more reputable places out there where people could look for more information?
Yeah, totally. I mean, on the internet, there's a good website. It's called Third Wave. If you were to Google Third Wave psychedelics, and they have a lot of stuff on microdosing on there.
Okay.
So it's thirdwave.co is a good one. There's also stuff like it's like a Wikipedia, but for psychedelics. It's called Psychonaut Wiki, and that has a lot of good information, like practical information on drugs and like harm reduction stuff, safety and what they are. And there's kind of, very well-known stuff like Erowid, which is EROWID, which is a good one. Okay. And there also, there are more and more educational, sites coming up nowadays in the psychedelic world. So I think usually if you have a specific question and you type it in Google, there'll be a number of websites, saying more or less a similar thing, competing for your attention, for your click.
Sure.
So, yeah.
Do you have a sense of what the mainstream medical community is feeling about this? Because I know when I worked like with with cancer or different other places in the past, especially when I was there, like the medical uses of marijuana in cancer treatment was something that was on the forefront, like was just not on the forefront, sorry, but it was just kind of coming out. And, it seemed like it was a pretty divided thing where some people thought, wow, this can actually like cure some cancers. And then some people were like, well, maybe it's good just for kind of alleviating some of the symptoms of cancer treatment, or there was a whole array of thought. But by and large, there were some people in the medical community still pretty resistant to it. Some people were more open to checking it out. And so there were some people that were just like diehard believers in it. Like, do you have a sense of what's going on in the medical community or the psychiatric community in regards to psychedelics and their therapeutic uses?
Yeah, I mean, my general sense is that people are largely open to them. There is a subset of people who are just too ingrained in their beliefs, as there always are, right? I'm sure there are for cannabis, maybe even still, who are just kind of very, very overly skeptical, not really looking at the research in an unbiased way, and not really sticking to the data that's being collected. But there is a large, I think the majority are becoming much more open-minded to it, and I think there, is a general acknowledgement of their potential of being useful, in some way. But a lot of people will say just like, it's still very preliminary. We need these larger studies, like, as the kind that I mentioned before, comparing it to standard therapy and placebo and all of this. So there's a general acknowledgement of them. They're not as stigmatized as they used to be at all. Okay. But it's still going to take, a few more years of these kind of rigorous studies till it becomes, a consensus that these things have significant potential and we can use them for a variety of things. Sure.
Now, I guess to piggyback off that, which would be even a more kind of, I don't know, maybe not important, but kind of a question kind of off that, but any sense of, how the pharmaceutical companies are reacting to this, and if there's going to be some pushback on their part, or through lobbying efforts, or are they seeing this as a threat, and is that something we should be concerned about?
Yeah. I'm not, I can't speak too much to that. It's a really good question. And I remember I saw an article somewhere basically saying some claims, basically making some claims against psychedelic therapy, and which are really just at the end of the day, just like weren't grounded in the research. Yeah. But like you could tell there was a motive there to downplay them. So I think there is some of that, kind of like a media warfare, as you see a lot of in the world these days, sure. Kind of like that from some companies, from some sources. But yeah, I can't speak much more to that. Like I know there's companies, for example, we'll develop a version of LSD where you don't have a psychedelic trip, but it still helps you and stuff like this.
Yeah.
But I think, there's a lot to say there, but they're trying to find their way into the market, I think, rather than full on trying to like take it down. Although there might be some of that, I'm just not sure.
Yeah, and maybe because it's too soon and it's not seen as a big enough threat yet.
Yeah.
But yeah, and I hopefully maybe we can get some more research going now that what was it, Oregon kind of just basically decriminalized every drug.
Yeah. And they also specifically legalized magic mushroom therapy.
Yeah, and
it's like now, yeah.
And that's what I mean. It seems like it's gonna I think Denver, San Francisco did as well within the city limits.
Yeah. I think it was I want to say Oakland, right?
Okay, Oakland. Yeah.
I'm not sure. and but also DC decriminalized psychedelic drugs as well.
Okay.
That was just with Oregon the other day at the same time, I think,
Yeah.
DC. So yeah, I mean, it's happening, right? It's more and more states are getting on board. Yeah, so I think things are hopeful. I think in the next 5 to 10 years, there's going to be so much more research. There's going to be more and more, relaxation of regulations, and it's going to be more accessible to people. And this is why I'm so excited to be just starting my career at this perfect time. And there's lots of potential here.
Yeah, you could still be right at the forefront of that, in medical application. And I think it is great, and I hope, I hope we get, some of these governing bodies on board. And it's exciting that the FDA is kind of like fast tracking things. If we can get the NIH on board here in America, and I'm sure there's a similar type of thing in Canada, to really start increasing funding of this, like we can, really, that's where we can really start, making some major kind of, research increases and whatnot. But yeah, I want to be a little respectful of your time. I know we said you have to go around 8:00. We're getting close to 8. Anything else that, I know we kind of just did like kind of a general overview here. Anything we didn't touch on that you think's important, or anything we should get into a little more depth before you got to go?
Yeah, I mean, a couple of things. Yeah, one, I think I've emphasized this a lot in this talk. Like, I don't want, people to go take a high dose of mushrooms by themselves now and just, and think that it's going to solve all their problems. Like, it's like these things are really powerful compounds that can put you in very difficult places when done recklessly, right? Sure. And so there's a lot of information on the internet these days on how to do it, in a similar way to some of these studies, or at least in a kind of ceremonial or ritual kind of context. To best ensure you're having a positive experience and that you're supported and grounded. And so I would definitely, I'm not advocating for the, reckless or illegal use of these things. And there are things to be revered and respected, and anybody who doesn't think so and tries them will soon think so, right? So,
yeah, I mean, obviously these are powerful medicines, and you gotta pay it the proper respect, or could be like you said, or you will learn to.
yeah, totally.
Go ahead. Sorry.
No, you can go ahead. Go ahead.
No, I was going to say, how can people find you? I know on Instagram, you're the Psychedelic Scientist. Is there other places where people could find out more about you and the work you're doing?
For sure, yeah. So there is my Instagram. Just search the Psychedelic Scientist. But the main thing is the Psychedelic Scientist is a YouTube channel. So if you YouTube the Psychedelic Scientist, I have a number of videos on there. And actually, I do have a video on how to best prepare for your psychedelic trip, and I have some other relevant videos as well. So I think as an additional source on the science and kind of a rigorous way of approaching these things, definitely check out the YouTube channel. It's something I created is basically just that, for me to share the research with a wider audience in a way that, is close to the research, but is also like accessible by non-scientists and is like understandable by any layperson. At least that's my aim with it. And so yeah, YouTube, Instagram. Also, I have a personal Twitter that I'm active on. It's Twitter. My handle is at MGirnNeuro. So MGirnNeuro. MGirnNeuro. So I tweet on there often, and retweet psychedelic articles and etc. So that might be a good way to keep up with some of the research as well.
Sure, and I'll put all that in the show notes. And I don't think I'm following you on Twitter, so I'll add you there. One last question, and this might be, I don't want this to be a can of worms, but it just kind of alluded to something like, at the beginning when you were talking about your initial kind of interests and whatnot. And I know in the world that a lot of people have, attribute psychedelics to more aspects of like spirituality and things like that. And I know, the role of science is to kind of more just kind of study the biological or the the more empirical aspects of things. From your standpoint, is it a service to just study those kind of biological aspects, or like do you feel like that that they should be like they can be separated or should be separated? I don't know if that makes sense, but do you see where I'm kind of going with that?
Yeah, totally. I guess you're asking like how much should we focus on just like being, hard-nosed empirical scientists versus acknowledging how they can, have people, go through these very spiritual experiences that they interpret that way.
Yeah.
And,
I mean, I know it's hard to quantify or measure aspects of spirituality, but when I've done any psychedelics, like you definitely feel like something more than just biological or psychological things are occurring, so how important, I mean, I know we have to, like in some instances, just look at the biological aspects of things or the physical aspects of things, but is it going to do it full justice kind of, are some of the studies kind of paying attention to more of the other aspects of things as spiritual stuff?
Yeah, these are very, good questions. And, on one side there is, they do actively acknowledge mystical and spiritual experiences in the scientific studies because it's unavoidable.
Sure.
And they do have questionnaires and et cetera that are aimed at getting at that. So it's definitely something looked at. But I would also say, these mystical or spiritual experiences are extremely, rich, complex, and nuanced. And I think our current way of talking about it scientifically is just not there.
Sure.
It kind of reduces them into specific things and simplifies it.
Yeah.
So ultimately, I think, there are perhaps aspects of the psychedelic experience that are beyond, definitely beyond current tools of science. And who knows if we can ever fully bridge those gaps, right?
Sure.
So I think the study of psychedelics requires science, like, neuroscience, psychology, but it also requires anthropology, religious studies in these other areas, and there is such a multifaceted and rich phenomenon that you can't just reduce it to particular scientific disciplines. Like,
sure. Yeah. Cause like, and mystical, I think is a better or more of the term I was looking for, mystical or spiritual, but I mean, I would love to see some of that data, like the self-reported kind of data about their experience itself, like from the anthropological frame of mind, like coming from that thing, from that standpoint. Yeah, that seems like it would be such a rich and interesting data set to look at for qualitative study. So I hope, I'm glad that there is some of that being done as well, because I feel that's just an important element to any kind of psychedelic kind of experience. So,
definitely.
Man. Well, dude, it was great having you on. I appreciate you coming and taking the time. I remember what it was like to be in graduate school, and every hour is precious. So,
right.
Especially with all the stuff you're doing to just get this information out into the world on top of your own personal research and keeping up with that stuff. So, again, thank you for taking the time to talk with all of us today. And I will put all that information in the show notes. So if you guys are at least bit interested in this, which you should be, go read the show notes and get involved, because it's an exciting area of research and a very important area. So of emerging research. So I can't wait to see where this goes. Yeah,
totally, and truly my pleasure. I love talking about this stuff, and thanks again for having me on your show.